Now we'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Teachers Retirement Board, September 11th, 2013. Jennifer, if you could take roll for us, please.
For the State Treasurer, Mr. Boykin. Here. For the Director of Finance, Ms. Ortega. Mr. Lawson.
Here.
Ms. Hendricks.
Here.
Mr. Rosensteel.
Here.
For the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ms. Sumat. Here. Mr. Unterman.
Here.
For the State Controller, Mr. McGuire.
Here.
Chairperson Dillon, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Before we get started, I would like to have a couple of announcements to make. One of the things that I have the pleasure of doing when I am chair every month is signing letters that congratulate our members on their 100th birthday. It's been fun being able to do that this year during our 100th celebration. And for everyone's information, I signed 13 letters this month. So we have 13 members in September that are turning 100. So. I'd also like to welcome Irena Ortega, Chief Deputy for Policy, Department of Finance. This is her first board meeting with us, so welcome, Irena. And then also like to congratulate Michael. Michael has been appointed by President Obama to become the United States representative as an ambassador to the Council of the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is headquartered in Montreal. So Michael will be leaving us, so I'd like you all to, with us, thank him for his service on the board and congratulate him on his new position. Okay. Our first item is the approval of the board agenda and the work plan.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve our agenda and work plan. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Any abstentions? That is passed. Before we get into our informational items, I'm going to need to take maybe a 5-minute break and ask for technical help. My mouse isn't working. So our first item is the proposed fiscal year 14-15 operating budget. Robin, if you're already here, you're ready to go. Yeah, I think so. Thank you. So, Robin, I'm turning this over to you. How's that?
Thank you. So I'm here to present the overview of the proposed budget for fiscal year 14-15 for the board's consideration. This is an information item in which we're soliciting your input to our proposed budgetary plans, and we are scheduled to present the final budget in November. So I've prepared a presentation again as a framework for discussion. I'm really here to answer any questions that you had about the proposals that we've made for this, I guess it is next fiscal year now. In terms of our overall spending plan, in this plan, we have quite a bit of change around what I'll call our fixed or operating base related to pro rata assessments, salary adjustments, benefit adjustments, as well as some budget change proposals that we have put forth to deal with the changes that are planned for the organization, in particular those around the business renew effort and the pension system replacement. So I want to go through the overall budget with you. The operational budget has components in all of our funds. The Teachers' Retirement Fund budget is the largest. Then we also have a separate budget for the Teachers' Health Benefit Fund, the Teachers' Defined Contribution Fund, and then we have a separate line now for the Information Technology Projects, which is where we're handling the funding related to Business Renew and the pension solution effort. So you'll see the overall budget request is $192 million with 1,046 FTEs. Some of that increase in FTEs is on a limited term basis in that it is projected for a 5-year period, so the classification of the positions would be permanent, but we expect to be able to absorb those back into operations through attrition over that cycle. So those FTEs are assigned to the project. In terms of the actual Teachers' Retirement Fund without corporate governance, we're seeing a 7% increase just as we did last year. So you can see the change in dollar amounts. As I indicated, a lot of the change, in fact, twice as much as the budget change proposals, is due to the basic changes in pro rata salaries and retirement expense. The increase in FTEs is spread over many of the different operating areas within the organization. You'll see those in technology services, investments, and then in various areas throughout the remainder of the organization. There are quite a few in benefits and services related to customer service, specifically reflective of the opening of another member service center in Southern California, as well as an increase in our contact center staff to deal with increasing inquiry volumes. In the corporate governance area, as well as in what we call the small funds, the increases are strictly related to the change in the baseline pro rata salary and benefit structure. So there's no proposed changes from the operations. It's really just a reflection of the changes in those, what I'll call charge rates, our basic costs. So this is health benefits and deferred compensation. The only nuance in deferred compensation, and we'll see that later in the presentation, is that we do ask for authority to spend an additional percentage based on this is a situation where we capture revenue from services we provide, so we ask for your authority to spend above the budgeted amount by 5% should we receive that in increased revenue. So with increased revenue comes the requirement for increased service, and so we need that expense cushion. So this really reflects that. So the baseline of $802,000 with the 5% based on the achievement of additional cash earnings. So it's cash, not accrual basis. And then the Information Technology Projects Fund is a fairly new budget line item for us. We established this to allow for the kinds of projects that we're embarking on where we have long-term capital expenditures, and so we wanted reappropriation authority beyond our typical 1 year. So this allows us to reappropriate this money for 3 years to allow spending for 5 years. So it gives us that permission to take any savings or any reductions in the capital expenditures from a current year and move that into subsequent budget years. And so this is where we're asking for an increase related to the funding necessary to staff the Pension Solution Project as it ramps up towards implementation. So what you'll see in this budget is a request for the staffing to initiate the Pension Solution Project in the actual implementation planning phases. And that is reflective of an analysis that says that we'll use the available resources to fund other business renew efforts. And we have another information item next on the agenda to talk more specifically about it, but I wanted to put it in the context of the budget as well. So this is a slide that reflects the staffing for the Pension Solution Project itself. It shows the increasing number of full-time equivalents in fiscal year 14-15 and 15-16. Those are the substantial adds. Then we flatten out over the period from 16-17 through 18-19, and we show the reduction of that back to no FTEs assigned to the project and the assimilation of that staff back into the operating organization. And so this is a 5.25 year plan, basically. It's for 3 months in fiscal year 19-20. In terms of the actual budget change proposals from other operating areas, we have 2 that we have aligned with the goal of ensuring a financially sound retirement system. One of those relates to investments in financial services to continue the transition into more internally managed investments, as well as to support the administrative and fiscal functions that are required to do that, and then an additional actuary to, again, double the capability of the system to provide the actuarial support that's necessary, particularly as we implement GASB 6768, and then we move into more changes associated with fair value measurement. In terms of managing risk, we have a request for an additional full-time equivalent in the enterprise strategy management area to focus on the sustainability of the organization overall. So translating just from the management of the building in a sustainable fashion to making sure that we're managing the organization sustainably, focused on environmental, social, and governance issues in our own operations as we ask or are influencing our investment partners to do. We also have a request here to augment staff in technology services as well as the information security office related to the the ongoing patching of our system to make sure that we're current with those patches and able to reduce the threat of infiltration by unwanted sources. So technology services and the Information Security Office have worked together in coming up with a plan to increase maintenance, increase oversight or review of those maintenance activities, and then to establish an annual audit process. And so these FTEs are focused on making that work operationally. In terms of enhancing service to members and other customers, I mentioned the additional member service center. This one is slated to go in the Inland Empire, specifically in and around San Bernardino, as well as the addition of staff in our contact center to deal with the increasing call demands. We've had a significant increase in the number of inbound calls and contacts from members, and we want to make sure that we can serve and be responsive to those requests. The Member Service Center request has a one-time request in 14-15, and then we ask for ongoing support beginning in 15-16 as we get that Member Service Center up and running. What our typical pattern has been is to initiate the process for the build-out in the summer and open the offices in the spring or late spring or summer, so that we need the operating or the run rate money in the following fiscal year. So we have tied those together. We've also learned from experience that we need to provide for lease escalation costs over time. So that was something that we've learned from the actual implementation of the Glendale and the Santa Clara service centers. And so this is reflective of that as well. The full-time equivalents are in exchange for contracted services that we have, which was our prior methodology. So we're transitioning from contract services through county offices of education or school districts into state staff. And so that's what the full-time equivalents are reflective of. In terms of improving our work environment and internal efficiency, we have a request for the addition of 1 administrative staff in the general counsel office. This is specifically associated with the increase in employer audits. It's one of the positions that we did not have encompassed in our BCP, from last year. So we've added attorneys as well as auditors to increase the ability to perform employer audits. But this administrative support position is also necessary to make sure that as we increase the number of appeals or we're actually going into Superior Court, that we can be responsive to documentation requirements. Sorry. In technology services, this is a request to transition from external contract dollars into actual state staff, again reflective of the desire to move away from contracted services and to focus on our internal capabilities to develop and maintain our software and infrastructure. And then this is the Business Renew one-time funding request, and you see it laid out across the 5.5 or 5.25 fiscal years. The FTEs are the accumulated full-time equivalents. So like I said, the big build is in fiscal year 14-15 and 15-16. There are some staff also added in 16-17 and 1 person in 17-18. And then it actually, these positions would no longer be funded after that initial quarter in 19-20. Again, with the expectation, given our succession planning efforts, that there will be positions within the organization that they could move to. They will have significant expertise in the pension solution as they've been a part of that project for the period of time that it's being implemented. And those were my comments. I really am here to answer questions or concerns or suggestions for changes that you might have.
Alrighty, we'll open it up for discussion. I don't have anyone in line as of yet, Robin, so I will ask you my question. We talk about bringing subject matter experts as we work on going forward with Business Direct, and then bringing in 18 backfill positions for those business units to take over the jobs that our subject matter experts have been doing. Have the business areas talked at all about how they'll mitigate the steep learning curve that those new positions would have to have? So we're pulling somebody that's going to be an expert out and then putting someone in that's totally new to that position. And the learning curve for that is so steep, so quickly. Thanks, Peggy.
So I can share some experience that we had with the Business Direct implementation, which is that we used this particular methodology with that implementation as well. And we used a combination of limited-term staff as well as contracted resources to do the backfill. What this method allows is to bring the people with the most expertise onto the project to do the future planning, which is where we want to put that expertise. And then it is something that requires a ramp up in the operational areas. It is something that requires the operational areas to stretch and management to be nimble, but we actually did do that successfully. And then a portion of that group of people has remained with the system in terms of support, and then a portion has returned to the operating areas. And we're obviously still in the assimilation process, but I can share with you that was the method that we used.
All righty, thank you, Robin. Peggy?
And that is part of the conversation we intended to have in the discussion of the next item. We're keenly aware of the impacts to business and production, and that is something that we absolutely want to minimize because providing service to our members is a paramount requirement of the system.
Thank you. Chris, you came up too. Did you want to?
Getting ready for the next.
All right, I love proactive. Okay, well, we have a whole line of people, so we'll start going through our list. Paul?
Thank you. The question I have is with respect to, excuse me 1 second, the reappropriation. So the reappropriation discussion talks about as much as $9 million available, $9.1 million. And then it says that it needs to be approved by the board. So is that $9 million is the spending of that $9 million included in what you have presented, or will that be an additional $9 million that you might present to us when we approve the budget?
So it is not included, but what I do want you to understand is that in planning for the other Business Renew projects, we have thought about those resources. So we've been doing a macro level analysis of how much additional funding we need to request, and part of that analysis has encompassed our reappropriation authority. It is not in this request, but it is something that if we get to the point where we need to fund something over and above this, we would come back to you with a request. In our planning processes, in anticipating the costs of those projects, like the data preparation project or the enterprise information management project or the requirements management project, to name a few, we have not depleted the reappropriation authority. We have used 50% or less of it in those planning estimates because we want that available. That's really our emergency fund, and we do not spend it without your approval, and it requires quarterly board and legislative reporting. So.
Good, thank you.
If I could just apologize historically too, so it's been a nice cushion available to the organization, but in reality, we've always, our organizational goal is to live within the budget. No one here thinks of that as an available excess fund unless it was something extraordinary. And Peggy, remind me, I think the only time I can remember in the 12 years I've been here that we used it was for the digital imaging project years ago. I think we decided that was such an unusual project that when we imaged all the member records, we sought board approval for that for like $1 or $2 million, but it was a long time ago. So it's out there, but I don't think that's the way we want to run the budget unless there's something really extraordinary. So that's the psychology behind that.
I'm glad to hear that. That makes sense. Good.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
There's a difference there between the overall reappropriation authority and the planning along the technology projects line within the budget where there is an intention to spend that money, but that's below that macro level view. So that could be where I was not clear in my presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yorena?
Yeah, so I have two questions. One is on the investments and financial services, the 15 FTEs. And this came up a little bit yesterday, but I just wanted to make sure I understand. And also, forgive me if this was discussed as part of the goal to bring more in-house. But is there additional information or an analysis of the how this 1.8 compares to whatever the fees are? Because there's a discussion about there being savings on the fee side. If this is all new workload and not replacing additional fees that are being paid currently, that's, I guess, one issue. If it is something that's being done rather than what's already being paid, it would be helpful to see kind of an offset, like in the next item, the actuarial item, there's a discussion about $875,000 being saved. So a little clarification on that, and then I'll just ask the other question because it's very similar. In the item on technology services where it's $0 and 9 FTEs, it would be helpful to know how much the contract savings are. I mean, so it's $0 for the positions, but it's replacing contracts that exist. So how much is the savings on the contracts that are being replaced?
Take the last one first because that's really straightforward. It's a one-for-one with the cost of those staff, but we'll make sure we put it in here. So we would reduce the consulting and professional services line item by the amount that's required to fund the position. So that's how that works. So again, we can certainly include that. This is a process that we've been going through over several years, so the board is used to it, but we can certainly include that.
It would be helpful to get a sense of the kind of staff based, like based on what the numbers are, like what the magnitude of that.
Sure. No,
action
you're
is.
absolutely correct. So that we do get more staff than we lose. So based on the cost factors. In terms of the investments line item, I want to be clear, 11 of those are investment positions and 4 of those are in financial services. So 2 of the financial services position are in our investment accounting area. 1 is in budgets and 1 is in the contract services area, trying to make sure that we can do throughput at the rate that is required. The actual items that discuss the offsets were a part of that internal-external analysis, and we can definitely incorporate that in the budget item as we move forward. I think the multiplier is like
10 to 1.
10, yeah.
Yeah.
It's huge.
10 to 1 is what we've used.
I won't jam in there. It's in our budget change proposal that we submitted to financial services. It outlined the savings we thought we would experience. The savings come out of continuous appropriations, which is a different budget, but we've outlined it.
We'll bring that forward. That's not a problem.
All right. Anything else, Lorena? Tom?
They're really comments more than questions, but one, the clarity of presentation of all these items is actually quite impressive to me. Thank you. One question I've got, which is a bigger picture question, maybe because I'm really new, is I don't have a sense of what the general level of spending, how it compares to peers. In other words, we spend about 2.5% of benefit payments on investment administration and payment administration. I think that's a pretty low number, but I really don't know how it compares to peers. And I think that'd be a helpful bit of background to share with us.
And we do that on an annual basis, just based on comprehensive annual financial reporting information. We also are engaged in a benchmarking group with the CEM Corporation in Toronto, but we have done a macro level analysis against peers in the United States of similar size, and we do it based on assets under management as well as the number of beneficiaries and members. And I will tell you, although I do not have that data right in front of me, we can certainly share it, that we are in the mid to lower mid range based on those metrics that are at a very macro level. So we take, totals and divide them by members and totals and divide them by assets and array those across the various funds. And we, in our pool that we have done this with, we have PERS and Texas Teachers and New York and Ohio, those kinds of things, and we're definitely on the mid to lower end of the scale, so we can provide that information.
Yeah, I mean, just my own base of experience, the investment expense relative to assets under management, that's really low. Should really be commended for it, given the results we have.
So we can definitely bring that forward. Like I said, it's something we've done annually now for at least 2, maybe 3 years.
Robin, we have access to past presentations. When would the last CEM report have been given to us? When do we usually do that?
You get an investment CEM report in February. pardon me, in November.
So last November was probably the one, if Tom wanted to take a look at what our last one was, it would have been last November.
You get on the investment side of the shop, you get a mid-year cost report that comes out in April of each year, and then you ask that every other year you get a CEM presentation, and that occurs in November every year. We'll get you that.
Okay, thank you very much. Peggy?
I would say that, similar to the conversation we had yesterday about the net pension liability versus the actuarial cost and the considerable difference there, CEM does do, on the administrative side, which is separate from their investment assessment, they do an assessment of cost per member. And I will say that in their analysis, we're a high-cost system. That their methodology does not look at the same things that Robin's numbers were looking at, so it's not a they're right, we're wrong, we're right, they're wrong analysis. But on the administrative side, based on the volume of our transactions, our service levels, and all of the other indicators that CEM looks at, we are one of the high-cost systems. In part, that's why we want a new pension system, because our system is heavily driven, our costs are heavily driven by labor costs. And California is a high cost of living state compared to other states. And there are other factors that go into that, but certainly labor costs are driving us, and we've squeezed as much efficiency out of the current system as we're likely to get. And the way that we're going to get additional efficiencies in the future is with a new system that allows us to rethink what our staffing levels are going to be, not at the point of implementing layoffs. I don't anticipate that the system would do that, but we might be looking at how we fill positions or which positions we fill as they become vacant through that process, because that's where we're going to start seeing some of the costs drive down as we eliminate the manual steps, we eliminate the rework, we eliminate the corrective work that the current system requires due to its limited functionality.
And perhaps capturing positions through attrition and things like that too. Alrighty, super. Tom, you have anything else?
No, that's good. That's for all good information.
Alrighty, I don't have anyone else in line. This is an information item. Thank you, Robin. Chris, you didn't say much on this one, but we'll catch you on the next one. And thanks, Peggy. Alrighty.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
They're all here for that next one. Okay, let's go into the pension solution budget. Item number 3.
Rob, while you guys are getting set up, I just want to kind of formally announce, we did this individually with you as board members, but for our audience too, our newest member of the executive staff, because he is obviously part of these issues that we're going to be talking about. Ashish, do you want to stand up? This is Ashish Jain, and he's coming to us from another state agency, but he brings a wealth of executive experience in technology and also in the private sector as well. He's got a long public sector experience, but also some very relevant private sector experience, particularly since we'll be working with a lot of outside vendors in this next initiative. So he's on duty next week, but he was willing to come by today just to make sure you all saw him. So thanks, Ashish. Yep.